Does San Diego State have a conference? Well, they believe they do. The Mountain West may believe something different. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody stopping by. We always invite your comments and questions there in the live chat for this very particular, very interesting, very odd situation that we have presented concerning San Diego State. Check out the video that we posted late last night. But we got Tony Siracusa on the line. You need to check out Tony's work if you love college football and you want a unique and very knowledgeable and experienced perspective, both based on what happens on the field, but also certainly concerning matters like this. Tony, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Hey, Mark, always glad to do it.
Absolutely. And again, it's lastwordonsports.com for Tony's work and everyone else there covering college football. And they do a very good job at exactly that, covering the nation. All right.
We're only 2 weeks away from the first conference media days.
Yes, conference media days are just a couple of weeks away. And at some point, we're going to start talking like football and position battles and all that. And I know that you're doing that at Last Word. We're doing our best to focus on the field, but these things seem to pop up more often than they used to. That's for sure.
Yeah, June used to be a time to kind of chill. You and I would maybe even take some time off, but
take some time off. If we got together, we'd talk about games from the mid 70s and all of that. But between the transfer portal and all this conference realignment, there is no rest for the weary. So let me lay out exactly the way I see this, and what really gave us some further information, of course, are these 6 letters that have been posted here recently by the San Diego Union Tribune. And we got Tony Altimore standing by. Tony, will bring you in just a second. I just wanted to set the stage here and basically my thoughts and perspective on this. Tony, how you doing? It's Tony
Altimore. Good to see the other Tony.
And strategist. We appreciate that. And I had stated to the other Tony Siracusa here just a few minutes ago, you two are the first two that I think about concerning matters like this. So to get both of you on here at the same time is phenomenal. So as I understand it, San Diego State has been obviously, along with SMU, those two schools that have been the most talked about, the most rumored for entry to the Pac-12. Okay, in recent weeks, San Diego State has made it public that they are in connection with the Pac-12, that they're leaving the conference. And then we go through the 6-letter stage communication between San Diego State and the Mountain West. And what is, I cannot make a complete connection on, would be at what point did it break down between San Diego State and the Pac-12? And at what point did it break down between San Diego State and their own understanding of what moves they were going to make? Or did they commit to their move to the Pac-12 and then that broke down and then they had to try to backpedal with the Mountain West?
To be honest, I don't know if anything's actually broken yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
And Tony may disagree with me on this. I kind of came up with what my sort of theory of 10 things that may be happening with SDSU and the Mountain West. And my guess is that it's multiple of them. But the first one is that San Diego State and the Mountain West may be getting exactly what they want, which is that San Diego State want an extension. The Mountain West politically cannot give an extension. And they basically have given that extension without giving that extension. I mean, San Diego State is their number one market. It's their number one school. And it's part of the Cal State system, which, what is the Cal State? Is it 3 or 4 of the Mountain West schools are Cal States? Like
4.
Yeah, there's a big block, right? Mm-hmm. That is. So the idea that like San Diego State and the Mountain West are like at odds with each other, I think is a little bit, well, I guess we'll find out, right? If the end of the month comes and San Diego State is conference-less and the Pac is still picking dandelions out in left field, which is possible, but it's also very possible. The East Village Times wrote a fantastic article that laid this out like 3 weeks ago, and it said that they thought that San Diego State would would ask for an extension. The Mountain West would say, no, we already recognized you. Okay, let's sit on this and talk about it at the end of the month. So at the end of the month, either San Diego State can beg their way back in, which the Mountain West and their fellow Cal State schools will let them, or they say, okay, yeah, you're right, we're gone. I do think the Mountain West might be one of the few grown-ups in the room. We could talk for a long time about the Pac-12 and why they're really gun shy about just declaring their addition before doing their media deal. There's a lot of reasons. I think it's Larry Scott post-traumatic stress disorder. What is that? PTSD. But well, remember when the Big 12 added their teams, nobody talks about this. They committed to a giant financial hole for the 8 schools on the expectation that they would probably be made good in the media deal in Texas exit. And they were. But I think with the Larry Scott history of like promises undelivered, the Pac-12 has said, we are not going to just like jump in on faith. I'll tell you another thing, and this might be a little tinfoil hat. People will yell at me at this. Gloria Nevarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West, was the PAC's deputy commissioner who ran the integration of Colorado and Utah. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible that she is talking to, I don't know, fill in the blank, Phil DeStefano, Carol Christ, Michael Crow, who was the chairman, I think, when she was the deputy commissioner, you know, DeStefano, who she ran the integration of his school. And they're saying, you know, Anna and Kirk and Mark are screwing around. Let's push this a little bit. So San Diego State may be more in cahoots than we think. Again, that might be a little tinfoil hat. We don't know. The other thing, they may be anchoring. So if you guys have ever like taken negotiations 101, they talk about anchoring, which is like draw a really hard line to be like, we're not, you know, if you put a hard line now, then you won't have to negotiate that exit further. And then on a negative standpoint, and this is the crisis mark that I think you're talking about, why they would do that. The Mountain West may, I don't think this is the answer, but it might be partially the answer. They may say San Diego State's leaving is a strategic inevitability. We're going to move forward. Whether it's this year, whether it's next year, whatever, we don't like hanging in limbo. The Mountain West may also have more risk tolerance. We know that the Pac is like risk averse. They're not taking any risk. The Mountain West may have more risk tolerance to play with this. Cal State interests might be pushing this. Tony, you would know the Cal State system better than I do, but I've been told it is incredibly, incredibly important to the Cal State schools that they get a Cal State school into the Pac. The symbolism of Cal State and Berkeley next to each other is monstrously important to them. And with the giant influence that the Cal State schools have in the Mountain West, you know, I just had this envision of like, go talk to him. No, go talk to him. You know, and the girls like shove her into him. You know, is there some degree of that happening? Yeah, that could be a little bit wild. I don't know the Mountain West's finances, but one of the things is they're really pushing to collect that exit fee now. Like they want the money now. So the Big 12 schools, what did they negotiate? Like 10 years they get to pay off their bill? Something wild like that? The Mountain West may be like, we're starting the collection process now. And it might be financial. The next thing, Mountain West may have had enough of San Diego State's baloney from 2012 when they did this in the Big East and then came back. And they may be like, we're not doing that again. I don't think that's as likely because these aren't the same people at most of these schools. And then finally, and this is the ultimate tinfoil hat, so far, Gloria Nevarez has been the only person with being grown up in this. And should the Pac-12 not be happy with this process and need a new commissioner, she was one of their leading candidates beforehand, and I think this would get her the job now. Anyway, those are my 10. Some are a little tinfoil hatty, but what may be going on here?
Yeah, I think one thing to point out in terms of context, this last Friday, June 30th, was not only San Diego State's deadline for its declaration to get out at 17 million instead of 34 million. It was also exactly the 1 year anniversary of UCLA and USC delivering the blow, announcing they were leaving the Pac-12. So look, George Kliavkoff got blindsided by that. There is a lot that has blindsided him. I more and more, I tend to think he didn't do his due diligence in the post Larry Scott era when he took the job, because we said a year ago, 2 years ago when he took the job, priority number one was to get into the TV deal immediately, and here you are, 11 months away from the expiration of the current TV deal, and you got nothing. And he's dangerously close to just being wiped out in terms of possibilities, potential. We've talked about streaming, and when you look at whether it's Amazon or Hulu or Apple, they haven't done college football yet. So it takes them a lot longer to kick the tires and look what they're getting into and look at all the contractual possibilities. And they needed to be having those conversations 9 months ago, a year ago, not wait until ESPN decided they were out of the tier 1 level and Fox was taking a pass. And we started having fun because we were looking at the CW network, which is hilarious, but may wind up being where some of the games go. He's also in the position where he is intentionally dropping the Pac-12 network going forward. This will be the last year the network exists as an on-air entity. He's made it clear that the lack of eyes makes it non-viable. They have moved most of their work out of their San Francisco headquarters that, was the bane of Larry Scott's existence. And they are going to exist for production purposes. They will be out in the suburbs and they will have production studios to work with whatever streaming companies come on board. And that will be it. There won't be a Pac-12 network on air. So Kliavkoff has had all this going on all at the same time. The UCLA USC departure obviously was the biggest because he didn't see it coming and you just lost your biggest market in the conference. In terms of Tony's comment about the importance of a CSU going in with the Pac-12, it is intrinsically important to the system. They have talked about it for more than a decade. Fresno State has been out kind of on the edge of a possibility, but I will tell you, having spoken with their athletic director, Terry Toomey, in the past, with the LA schools gone, Terry doesn't really care about going to the Pac-12. His point was he was always able to play the LA schools, use it as a recruiting tool for Fresno State. He doesn't care about recruiting against Cal or Stanford or, whomever, Arizona State. He was able to play the LA schools, bring in 10,000, 12,000 Fresnoites, and, pack the end zone at the Rose Bowl on the visitor side and beat UCLA or play competitively against SC and use it as a recruiting tool. Without the LA schools, there's less of an interest for Fresno State to even join the conference. The money certainly is not as enticing. So as San Diego State has been the obvious choice for a long time. Like Tony said, they've talked about SMU, they've talked about Tulane, they did talk about Fresno State, and if push comes to shove, maybe Fresno State goes. It's just not as big a priority for them now. I actually see, and to your point, Mark, it all goes back to these 6 letters. Everything is about the 6 letters. Because San Diego State, I gotta wonder what Adela De La Torre, the school president, was thinking about. And she hit send on that email, the first one, which was about 2 weeks before the June 30th deadline. And look, they actually said, we intend to leave the Mountain West Conference, but we are asking for an extension because at June 30th, it was a $17 million buyout. On Saturday, it became $34 million. And so they said, we are leaving, but we want an extension.
And that's where I get hung up between about letters 3 and 5. And I would think that one of the points that I made earlier, I will retract, because San Diego State, in some portions of this timeline, appeared to be maybe not on it the same page with itself. But since she is the point person and she is the communication point person and also the person in authority, I would think that there would be no way that these communications were not reflective and accurate to what San Diego State was deciding. But somewhere between letters and 3 and 5, it appears to me as though San Diego State either had a deal in principle with the Pac-12 or felt confident of its position with the Pac-12. And at some point that fell apart because then they're backpedaling and trying to get back into the Mountain West.
I think it's the latter. I don't think they had an offer from the Pac-12 yet. Pac-12 is committed to getting a TV deal put in place before it commits to its next 2 schools. Even if that means that they wind up with a year as the Pac-10, post UCLA and USC leaving and having not filled in that gap for a year. Kliavkoff has committed to, we will deal with expansion when we get the TV deal. But look, I mean, that first letter actually said, and I got to wonder,
Well, Tony, here's a question for you. Is it Kliavkoff has committed to that, or the presidents have instructed that be done?
Yeah. It's the president's.
Because I was told by somebody at a school, one of the schools, that the conference thought they were done in March, and the president sent them back for rework.
Right.
And so, the Big 12 mindset is to think like commissioner as imperial overlord, when in reality the commissioner is the general manager answering to 12.
That's correct.
12 presidents who don't always have a track record of making the best or the fastest decisions.
Well, and that's a great point. There's been a lot of turnover in the past 5 years at the president/chancellor positions at some Pac-12 schools. So there is an uneasy mix of some new blood presidents who want to push forward, be aggressive with the media deal, expand the conference, and some others who are kind of like, let's take it slow. I think you had referred to them as risk averse, and I think that's completely accurate. You get a guy like Gene Block at UCLA who is completely risk averse. He actually was still in Larry Scott's camp up until the day Scott packed his office.
By the way, how did we convince Larry Scott or convince Gene Block to come with us to the Big Ten? Did they just throw him in the trunk and drive him to Chicago?
You know what? That's all Martin Jarman. It really is. Martin Jarman and the
I love Martin Jarman.
The in-house attorneys who convinced him that there's nothing the state of California or the UC regions can do to stop you, despite all their saber rattling. You're fine. Take the money because it's the only way you're going to get the athletic department out of debt. But, look, you got to wonder what J.D. Wicker at San Diego State is thinking while he's sitting there watching these letters go back and forth, probably wanting to throw his laptop into the wall. Because, look, that first letter said, we formally notice that San Diego State intends to resign from the Mountain West Conference. There's no ambiguity in that. There's no, we're pondering our options, we're looking at things. And then they went out to ask for the extension. The second letter was the Mountain West responding to San Diego State, basically saying, we confirm receipt of your letter. Thank you very much for your correspondence. Third letter was dilatory, saying, okay, well, let's be clear. We are talking about leaving, but really what we're looking for is this extension. So can you please give us the extension? Letter 4 was the most appropriate response from the Mountain West, which was, dear San Diego State, go pound sand. We're not why would we give you the extension? Letter 5 was San Diego State on Friday, pretty much within hours of the deadline, saying, good news. We've decided we're not going to leave you. We've decided, even though we were going to turn our backs on you and run to this bigger conference, we've decided we're going to stay. And then the last letter being, that's very nice of you. We've decided you've already left. And not only do you owe us the $17 million exit fee, that $6.5 million payout that you get for being in the Final Four and March Madness finals, and your portion of the payout the conference payout that goes to all the schools in the conference, we're holding that in escrow against your $17 million that you owe us. And we very well may just allocate it against the rest of the schools in the conference, and they'll have a good party on, your letterhead.
On your dime. Well, and that's where this is where I look at it, and there's one of two things at this point. And I'm not convinced as to which one it is. If the Pac-12 sorts this out by the 17th, and by the way, it doesn't mean sort it out to like us sitting here all happy. I mean, sorts it out to behind the scenes, sorts it out to resolve. Then I think that everybody gets exactly what they needed. The Mountain West gets to be tough. San Diego State, sorts it out. We may not know that, but if the Pac-12 generally is still the Little League left fielder picking dandelions and paying no attention to the ball game that's happening, then in all seriousness, the Pac-12 needs a new commissioner and it needs 3 new presidents on its board.
All of those things are true. I like the sitting out in left field picking dandelions.
I mean, that's what and it could be. I mean, and remember, one of the things that when we listen to like Big 12 people they yap about the commissioner as supreme overlord. Remember that Kliakov, for example, told the board, I want to add TCU in Houston.
Right.
And the board nixed it.
Right.
So the board came back and said, the risk-averse board came back and said, does this mean less money? And he said, well, yeah, because we go, nope. Is this less money? And the board said, yep. And they said, okay, well, we're done.
And herein lies the problem is they're negotiating the TV deal because they don't. There's no proof. While there may be agreements in principle, conversations being had, SMU, San Diego State, whatever duo you want to throw in there, there is no solid commitment from anybody. So you are negotiating a TV deal minus the Los Angeles market with essentially 10 schools, hoping to get in an elevator clause.
Well, I think they have that. I think they have conditional stuff signed.
They likely do, but we don't know how much that elevator clause is for when they add the 2 other teams. And so the deal for the 10 may wind up being proportionally a worse deal once they add the 2 other schools. You may, and I'm just throwing random numbers out there, you may be getting $30 million a year per school. And then once you add the other 2, the elevator clause, only takes it up to 32, 33 million per school. Because you're adding these 2. And so for adding those 2 schools and only getting a couple million more per year is a pretty weak deal. And there is no indication. Look, you've also had to deal with, if you're Kliavkoff, you've also had to deal with the Colorado issue, which is not a quiet issue at all. I am a firm believer, based on people I've talked to, that Rick George has talked to the Big 12. Because right now, if you are any Pac-12 school, if you're any of them, and you don't have a plan B, or you're not working on a plan B, that is management malfeasance, because you don't know where this is headed. And I absolutely believe, look, you got Dion's contract you got to pay, and you got no TV deal coming in, and the Big 12 will happily take you and any one of the other 4 corner schools, and they'll grab you, and it'll be great, and they'll welcome you back into the fold of the old, Big 8. So you've got your schools, a lot of them, having to work on plan Bs because of the unknown. They've had some deals, as Tony pointed out, months ago, at least in deals in sketch that they didn't like and sent it back to Kliavkoff. And George is really in a tough spot right now. Frankly, really a no-win proposition, because you're going to get a deal at some point, but that certainly doesn't mean you've got unanimity and happiness amongst your remaining 10 schools.
Well, and here's a question for you, Tony. Does this echo what you've the thing that I was told by people at Arizona a year ago, even, and have had reiterated to me, was that their greatest fear is losing Cal and Stanford to the Big Ten.
Right.
because the anchor into the state of California. It's not about, the dumb people talk about Oregon. Nothing in that conference since 1957 has ever been about Oregon.
Right.
It's about Cal and Stanford.
Right.
And so this is why we talked about it on our Pac show with Mark on Mark's channel a year ago, that those schools were terrified and were making plan Bs, because if Notre Dame and the Big Ten said, oh, and we're going to take Cal and Stanford and Notre Dame and Miami, whatever, that would just collapse the whole model for them, and they would need to make a move. But the thing that really drives me crazy about this whole thing, again, they may come through, and it may be behind the scenes. We may not know about it, but they may come through and solve this by the end of the month, and I hope they do. But if they continue to screw this up, they need to make changes in the people that are doing it.
Well, I think that needs to be done anyway. I questioned the hiring of Kleofkoff. I went on Mark's show the day he was named, and Mark and I were sitting there on the air doing our research as to who this guy was. And I was getting text messages from people who used to work for him at MGM Grand and say, oh, this is the kind of manager he is. This is the kind of boss he is. This is the way he'll run the conference. And all well and good, but he's been caught flat-footed way too many times. I liked the idea that they went with someone who had negotiated media deals before, and event deals and sponsorships and all of that. Quite frankly, I actually thought they should have gone with Gloria Nevarez as the commissioner. I thought she would have been a really strong commissioner. And right now she's sitting there laughing. Yeah, right now she's sitting there laughing, saying, "You love me, you love me some now, don't you?"
Well, I mean, she might be the only grown up in the room right now.
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close.
And I respect her. And again, I thought that the guy ran Eastville, Paul Garrison, sorry, blank his name, who's awesome and really smart. Like, I thought he laid it out perfectly, where he was in. I used to work in foreign affairs, so this is a very State Department way to handle it. This like, okay, well, we're just going to pretend this letter didn't happen and just accept your offer from the first one. That's a very State Department way to give things that you can't give.
Right.
But the PAC has to do it.
Right.
Is the thing.
And
I don't trust them to do it.
You referenced July 17th. Just the Mountain West board is having a meeting on July 17th, minus San Diego State. They're not invited to the meeting because they are exiting for all intents and purposes. So it's no different than, Gene Block, Martin Jarman. They're not invited to official Pac-12 meetings. The president, SC, isn't invited to Pac-12 meetings right now. They will be at Pac-12 media days. But you also have that. That's why I was trying to grab a look at my whiteboard with my conference media day schedules. Can I tell you something funny? What's that?
Can I tell you something funny?
Yeah.
This comes from a very, 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 very high up individual at a very major school that none of you would guess, whose take was the Pac-12 needed to call USC and UCLA and say, "Mom, Dad, we broke it. Will you come fix it, please?"
Yeah, it's there's no way either one of them would have come back. You're not going to turn down the $70 million.
No, not to turn it down, just to fix it.
Oh, I got you.
Just come fix it for us. Mom and Dad, come fix it for us. Anyway,
if you're Kleofkoff, you've got to have.
I laughed so hard I spit out coffee as he was saying that.
If you're Kleofkoff, you've got to have the Pac-12 media deal done by Pac-12 Media Day. You absolutely, because the image, the PR, the disaster of going into that with all of the media there in Vegas. You even moved the event to Vegas, your hometown, which will soon be the Pac-12 headquarters. You've moved everything there, and to have everybody gather there and the coaches and the ADs, and you've got no media deal in place.
And I'm going to take it
a disaster.
And I'm going to take it a step further. And this is a very military government answer. If the presidents are preventing you from having it done by Media Day, then you need to resign. because if they are not letting you do it, and this is I spent too long with the government perhaps, but this is a very sort of government, military, foreign affairs ambassador answer. If your bosses are not letting you do, it's either your fault that it's messed up or it's theirs.
Right.
And if it's not fixed, then it's time for change. And by the way, that would be very, very closely tied into that San Diego State.
Yeah.
Because again, I believe San Diego State being San Diego State, the role of the Cal State schools in the Mountain West really being the only grown-ups in the room. If the Mountain West needed to, they could come back and say, okay, San Diego State will take you, or they might even do something wacky like, okay, San Diego State, we know you're still going to leave. You can stay for another year, but we're going to start collecting your departure fee now.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If they did, San Diego State kind of deserves it. Actually, no, the Pac-12 deserves it.
2 points to make here. One is a question, one is a comment. The comment would be to expand on what Tony had to say concerning media days, and that being a bit of an artificial deadline, but a PR deadline for sure for the Pac-12 would be, we all know that college football fans are going to be all over the internet during media days, looking for information, looking for storylines, and these other conferences are going to be spinning everything forward and in a positive, optimistic, hopeful way. And so the championship aspirations of different teams and all the positive things involving the Big Ten and the SEC in particular, but really all the other conferences are going to be all over social media, all over the internet, and consumed by all college football fans. And the only thing that's going to matter, that anyone's going to talk about, that anyone's going to be asked, that's going to supersede great quarterback play in this conference and USC's elevation and possible bid for a college football playoff berth and the other teams that are really strong, is going to be conference realignment and TV deal. You can't get a TV deal. Why can't you get a TV deal? Why don't you have one? That's
well, and actually, Mark, let me cut him just a little bit of slack in that. Let me step back from he should resign. If they don't have something locked in that cements the schools in, because here's the all honest thing. I mean, then there's a million ways you can structure contracts to have. I mean, these things should be like 1 million pages anyway, not like the 3-page grant of rights. But you could have some kind of conditional whatevering contract in place that lets the Big 12 baloney that risks destabilizing the conference end. So if they don't have their final long form contract signed with Apple, whatever, I'll actually even cut them some slack on that. They have to end the existential question of the conference's future. Even though everyone tells me, yes, all the presidents are on board. I know they're of course they need to make sure there's plan B. I've been told by somebody who knows this stuff that the talent agency people are after Dion with a fervor, and the Colorado may be just indulging him. But they have to do some step that moves forward from the no comment.
So let's say they have
comment
that.
Can't end.
So let's say they have that in place behind the scenes when Pac-12 Media Days hit. What is the company line? What do they tell the media to say, we've got a deal, but we don't have a deal. We can't announce the deal, but we really do have a deal.
I don't think they're smart enough to do this based on their complete inept PR. But you come out and you say, as we finalize, we have agreed on a grant of rights, blah, 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 and we'll announce our expansion plans and final details soon. You have to end the baloney. I think they have to stop the bleeding. They can do the plastic surgery later. But again, I think they need to come out with the whole thing before media days. But that's in, what are we now, 2 weeks? 2 weeks and 2 days?
It's about Pac-12 Media Day is end of July. So
21st, right?
Yeah.
So
you're right. The 5th. Yeah, you're right. So
2 weeks and 2 days.
Yeah.
They need to have something, or else they need to make changes.
Right.
I think
you have to, and you do have to at least have, a working document, a memorandum of some kind that outlines what the TV deal is going to be. and have everybody sign off on it, even if all of the logistics, still need to go through the lawyers and whatever the case may be. I would agree with that, because if you can't have the entire thing done in time, which at this point to me it seems like you can't.
I don't know how you do.
Yeah, then you've got to have something, and which is going to be, when you get all the media there, not so much, if you've never been to a media day and it's a circus, and the Pac-12 one is a bigger circus than most because they cram all 12 teams into one day. So you have not only the team beat writers, but you've got all the national media from ESPN and Fox Sports and CBS and, whomever else, who are going to, corner Kleofkoff for details. And it's going to be a tap dance unlike any other that he's ever done. But it's the most important tap dance he will have ever done, because it's about saving the conference. It's about saving his job. It's about saving the reputation of the conference, because there are enough schools working on Plan Bs. And look, we can sit here and talk about how the Big Ten has talked about they're done expanding. Well, sure, they're done expanding today as the question is asked. They may not be done expanding when something else arises next week, next month, 6 months from now, whatever the case may be. Getting the Bay Area schools, and I agree with Tony, Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten is ridiculous.
Well, at least Oregon.
They're going to go together. They are. They need each other for a name pull. And
although Washington sold Oregon up the river when they started the pack.
They did. But there's that, for that cachet of two big name programs, they need each other to go together. But Cal and Stanford easily fit the AAU model of the Big Ten, even though they say it's not a determining factor. You don't see them rushing out to take schools that aren't part of the AAU. For all of the effort that the Big Ten likes to put in on stuff besides football, because they like to claim that they're really, hey, they're Stanford for you, with the winningest athletic department in terms of NCAA championships in the country. Cal is the kind of tag along, but Cal comes as the standard bearer of the name of the University of California system. The irony that goes with that is that Cal went crying to the UC Board of Regents when UCLA was leaving. And they tried to get the Board of Regents to stop UCLA, even though the Board of Regents absolutely was never empowered to do so. Not even close. And
I mean, this is the ultimate backstab to like the Berkeley of the Berkeley people.
Right.
And I mean, you are Mr. University of California, so I'm not questioning you know this best, but the ultimate backstab is the president of the University of California was on board, as were a whole bunch of the major regents, and they let UCLA just stab Cal in the back.
Absolutely. But then the final decision from the UC Board of Regents was a suggestive mandate, because they're not empowered to mandate, but it was a strong suggestion,
which they still haven't come back to yet, by the way.
Right. The UCLA helped give over a little bit of its newfound riches to Cal to help offset some of the losses they're going to feel from, their brother school in Southern California leaving. So Cal's going on the welfare dime, getting some handouts from UCLA, which actually they're not getting, and UCLA has no intention of ever giving them. And now Cal and Stanford may be next up to make that same move.
Well, and can we have a quick laugh about the UC Regents? So here's another laugh, guys. When they started the Pac-12, the UC Regents passed a 5-point plan that said that any school that the University of California played needed to meet 5 key points.
Right.
But they didn't really do the math on that. Being the UC Regents, they just came up with their 5 points and passed them. And I'll tell you how many schools passed those 5 points. 9.
Right.
The 8 Ivy League schools who refused to play them already, and Michigan. So the UC Regents don't have a history of like thinking all this stuff through.
No. Well,
it turns out Michigan could not play 10 games against Cal and 10 games against UCLA.
Well, and then it was their own doing in 1996 with their memo, which gave the power to run the departments within a university back to the university, which is what undid their power to stop UCLA from leaving. UCLA had complete control over its own athletic department, just as it does its economics department or liberal arts or anything else. And so, it was a lot of roaring for a bunch of nothing. But now, like Tony said, Cal and Stanford are viable objects for the Big Ten at some point. But to pull it back to San Diego State theoretically, and I emphasize theoretically, doesn't have anywhere to go right now. It's going to have options, but as we sit here today, they don't know what the options are, and neither do we. I tend to think, and I think Tony included it on his list. I tend to think that this winds up as an extension between San Diego State and the Mountain West, that they wind up married together for at least another handful of years. It's in San Diego State's best interest to stay married to the one instead of start dating the one who is, off partying and in clubs all night with no plan for the future.
Exactly. Well, that was going to be my question. And I was just going to pose that as a probability. Does this continue to be a relationship, although a very fractured one, because San Diego State, to Tony's point, they're all Tony's points, whether it's Syracuse or Baltimore, of course. But to Tony's point,
make it easy for you. Yeah,
it makes it easy for me. Yes, that San Diego State is the best commodity for the Mountain West. So the Mountain West is a better conference with San Diego State, of course, but sure. San Diego State's in a position of compromise concerning the exit fee, concerning the money that's being held back for the distribution revenue right now, and because they've backpedaled publicly, and it's all out there for everyone to see, that they come up with some type of resolution, but the Mountain West has them by the throat to say, hey, we're going to come out a little bit ahead because of this PR nightmare and everything you've put us through. So we need a little bit of security and stability, at least for a few years, and you're going to commit to us.
Well, and here's the other thing that also nobody's talking about. And Tony, you know this better than I do, so I would love your thoughts on this. Like, it takes a while. Like, the actual integration of these schools into the conference takes a while. Now, if I was the Pac-12, which I clearly am not, I would have had a McKinsey and an EY team at San Diego State and at SMU since last December planning this integration. Yep. But I believe that has not been happening.
It is not.
So at whatever point they say yes, they have to try to pull the trigger on that. And that is there's a reason that this stuff has always been done as a 2-year integration for these schools. So it wouldn't be the end of the world if they waited another year. I know we in our like now mindset don't like that, but they might need another year at this point.
The Pac-12 president sent a representative down to SMU about 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago, to discuss, are you even interested? Should we even be having these discussions? Should your name even be included? So there was nothing of the details of what it takes to get there. SMU's response, and this is according to people that I know within the SMU administration, came back and said, well, come to us with something, and we'll tell you whether we're interested or not. Because right now you're asking, would you at some point, based on the right circumstances and financial equities, be interested in joining the Pac-12? Well, yeah, sure. Why not? It's a given. But we don't know what those terms are. We don't know what the finances are. We don't know, as Tony called it, the integration plan. We don't know what any of that is. Get back to us when you have a plan. There's been no meeting with SMU since then. At least not in person directly at SMU like the first one was. So there is that problem, how long it takes to do the integration. Look, we also, this has become a national story in part because of the run San Diego State had in basketball, right? If San Diego State gets knocked out in the first round of the NCAA tournament, it's still a story. It's still a big story. But I also think we need to remember who San Diego State is. San Diego State is a commuter school with 35, almost 40,000 undergrads, notoriously one of the biggest party schools west of the Mississippi. It's got a brand new stadium because it was playing in the old Jack Murphy, Qualcomm, whatever name it was at any given time. So they've got Snapdragon Stadium, which was built specifically for them. Beautiful complex that seats roughly about 38,000, but is expandable to 55,000. If you're the people who helped finance Snapdragon Stadium, you want San Diego State to go to the Pac-12 because you want Oregon to go down there and play and fill and expand, use the expansion on that stadium and fill it. And you want Washington down there. You want all those schools down there. Playing in the Mountain West is fine and fun and all of those things. And San Diego State is the best athletic program in the Mountain West right now. But the draw of the Mountain West opponents has its limits, has limitations.
And I also believe strategically, if you're the Pac-12, the leadership of the Pac-12 needs as many anchors in the state of California as they can have.
Sure.
And quite honestly, and people just absolutely lambaste me for saying this, but the many things that I would have done if I were the Pac-12 that they didn't do are too long to list. But one of the things that I would have done is I would have also had a McKinsey team or whoever figuring out what would it take to put a team at Long Beach State or UC Irvine. Just run the numbers. Now, you're probably not going to do it, but the importance of the Southern California market to the Pac-12 for donors, for alumni engagement, for student recruitment. I mean, heck, ASU has a new campus in LA. Mm-hmm. Literally, and down the one of the was it the Examiner building? I forget. Yeah. UCLA bought one of the newspaper buildings, and ASU bought the other one.
Right.
Is the ASU LA campus now? I mean, to go after LA students, like they need to have a presence in Southern California. And I know that, and I said maybe they should do this every so often. And then Klyakov went on the stage and said they would do it. We'll play games in LA. Well, nobody cares about Washington versus Arizona State at SoFi. They need to have a SoCal team, right. And San Diego State is that team.
Right. That's all there is. Look, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Long Beach State played football. And, they dropped the program for financial reasons. Obviously I'm old enough to remember when Cal State Northridge played football, mostly because I did the radio play-by-play for 2 years. So I remember it well. But, and they dropped it for financial reasons as well. So it's very expensive to run a football program. I don't know that UC Irvine has any interest in doing it.
Well, and I don't think they would, but I'm just using that as an example of this is the type of stuff they should have been thinking about.
Right. No, and I get that because the bottom line is you need a presence in Southern California, regardless of who it is. And San Diego State is that. The people who financed the stadium for Snapdragon Stadium, they want San Diego State in the Pac-12. San Diego State, really, frankly, right now is better off doing whatever it takes to kiss and make up with the Mountain West.
Well, we appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Comments and questions are welcome. We appreciate Tony Altimore here, consultant strategist who joins us on a regular basis here at the Voice of College Football. Tony and I have a deep dive scheduled for Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Texas deep dive, talking Texas Longhorns, and Tony reviewing academics, athletics, football, of course, and all the metrics and numbers there at the University of Texas. And we understand Texas is back. That's official this season.
I was just going to go there. I was just going to go there, Mark. I was going to say, we'll need to know, is Texas back?
We'll be counting on Tony to supply that. He'll display all the charts and the metrics and everything, but bottom line, he's going to have to deliver is Texas back. Tony Siracusa, Last Word on college football, and all the fine folks there at Last Word. And Tony is on just about every board of college football writers you can think about, and rightfully so. Tony, what have you been working on recently?
Well, yeah, I fooled enough people into thinking that I know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I was added to the board of directors of the Football Writers Association. So that was a huge honor. But we have thank you, I appreciate that. We are thank you very much. We are working on some fun things as we head into. We've been working on them, going through conferences and going through the best returning players by position, by conference. Takes a lot of digging in some cases because of the transfer portal. Transfer players don't count unless they transferred from, within the conference. So we've been doing a lot of that. We're starting to hit a lot of position profiles. I think you and I talked about it last time, Mark, in that while we certainly send our thoughts to a lot of digital media outlets that are struggling and have started to cut back, we've been fortunate in that we've added some positions. And so, you can go on Last Word on Sports and go to the college football site, and you're going to see we've hired 5 new writers in the last 4 months to cover teams that were not previously being covered. So we're excited about the future. We are going to go into the season with the biggest writing staff we have had in my 6 years at Last Word on college football. So we're very excited about that, and a lot of really great coverage. And I know a lot of these folks, they get excited about being on your show. So I know we'll see plenty of Kevin McGuffey. We'll see plenty of K-Mac on there during the year. And K-Mac is one of our longest standing writers, been covering Kentucky about 6 months shy of my time at Last Word on college football. So he's one of the old timers and one of the most knowledgeable guys. And you'll be glad to know that we have the return of an old favorite of yours. Mike Laval has come back to Last Word on college football. He's been helping me in an administrative standpoint. He is now going to be back not only covering Tennessee, but running our Heisman polling every week. And so Mike Laval is back in the writing fold for Last Word on college football.
That is the best news I've heard today. Mike and I, Mike is one of the great conversations in college football. There's no question about that. And Mike and I go back to his days on Last Word, and I brought him on here as much as I possibly could because he is always worth the listen, a bastion of knowledge and perspective.
He is. And we spent a lot of time conversing when I was down covering the Gasparilla Bowl in December, the exciting Wake Forest, Missouri showdown. He and I met.
Is that during Gasparilla, or is it just named after it?
No, it's just named after it.
It's not during the festival? Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. Because that's supposed to be fun.
It is supposed to be fun, but it's just one of those pre-Christmas bowl games that, it's on the cutting floor every year, is potentially gone. But Mike and I started our conversations, and he is back in the writing team for Last Word. So a lot of positive things. And of course, we always appreciate the support you've given us and helping promote our writers and our work. So,
you tell Mike, Tony, you tell Mike that as soon as he shows his face back live, that it better be here.
It will be. I will make sure of it. I will make sure you get priority over any of the other sites.
I appreciate that. Tony, thank you so much for stopping by. And everybody, Last Word on college football. They are going to get you prepped for the college football season like none other. So Last Word on college football with Tony and the rest of the gang there. Tony, thank you so much for your time.
All right, guys. Tony, good seeing you. Take care, guys. Be well.
Good luck to your Bruins.
All right, man. Be well.
And of course, Tony Altimore, consultant strategist. And again, we're going to get together on a Thursday night for a big Texas deep dive. And is there anything else out there, Tony, that you're working on that people need to be aware of?
No, we're going to get our Pac-12 show going back again. I talked to Larry and the guys, and the season's getting started. So we got to talk about teams. Hopefully they'll get a media deal at some point and be good to go.
I can't wait for that. Are we looking at another Sunday night destination?
We'll see.
We know? Or Wednesday? It was Wednesday night. I'm getting that confused with the other College Football After Dark show.
Yeah, yes. I got to talk. There's a couple of folks we have to talk to. I was going to talk to you about it after this to make sure we were all good to go, and we should have a good group. So,
All right, folks, we will see you in about an hour over on the Michigan channel for Wolverines Live. Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. That's the show lineup tonight, and we will see you in about 60.